They tell you what to think. They decide what you should hear and what you shouldn't. Not here. The Western Standard does not bow, bend, or beg for approval. No spin, no handlers, no watered-down headlines. Just fearless Western journalism. If you believe the truth belongs to the public, not the powerful, then you belong with us. Join us at westernstandard.news.
Good day. Today is November 19th, 2025. I am Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. We've got our usual lineup in the Calgary newsroom here. Western Standard former opinion editor Nigel Hannaford, here again, and Western Standard senior Alberta columnist Cory Morgan.
Always a pleasure.
Back by popular demand, we have our new Western Standard Parliament Hill correspondent, Will Barclay.
Hey everyone, great to be back.
All right. Well, we got some fun stuff from both Ottawa and Alberta where we're at here. The secret Liberal Conservative coalition. I think I'm probably overstating it a little bit when I say that, but the federal budget passed with, there was just the theater around it. It passed with the Conservatives voting against it, but really wanting it to pass. So people hiding behind curtains, literally, to make sure that it was close, but not too close. So, how the Liberals are now staying in power, strangely, with the support of the Conservatives. We'll talk about that. Alberta's healthcare revolution. The Globe and Mail reporting. I haven't seen comment from the government yet, but in Alberta, Globe and Mail is reporting that the plan is to allow doctors to practice in both the public and private systems, which I think would constitute a pretty big breach of the Canada Health Act, which I think is awesome because Ottawa has no damned business telling doctors what they can do in provinces because healthcare is under strict provincial jurisdiction. So that's big news, and the usual suspects, their heads are blowing up right now. It's glorious to watch. But first, we'll start something also closer to home here in Alberta. The notwithstanding clause. It was used just the other week to legislate the Alberta Teachers Union back to work. They were being obstinate, just not even negotiating. They were offered massive raises. Said, nope, not good. We're not even talking. It looked like this was a strike that could have drawn out forever. I think they actually wanted to be legislated back to work. I just don't think they expected the government to invoke the notwithstanding clause to do it. Now we find out that the notwithstanding clause is going to be invoked to protect three pieces of legislation that passed last spring around legislation that involves trans issues, around keeping biological males out of biological female sports, restrictions on, stopping people who are minors from transitioning, and banning schools from hiding the fact that their child might be using different pronouns and going by a different gender than the one that they were born with and that nature has assigned to them. Those pieces of legislation have already passed in a normal, civilized country. That legislation, Cory, would easily withstand a charter challenge, but our in this country, with these judges, with their rather liberal view of the charter, you never really know. It would not be beyond the pale for them to say that, no, it is a violation of your equality rights under the charter, to not be allowed to wrestle against little girls when you're born a man, or born a male. So preemptively protecting these pieces of legislation from charter challenge. I saw a bunch of weepy people on the CBC. The CBC was so deferential, and you have hostile interviews, you have friendly interviews. I've done friendly interviews. It's fun. But I'm not working for the national broadcaster, as they call themselves, the state broadcaster. Just these, how does this make you feel? They're interviewing some woman who claims that I think her boy is a girl. I don't know their particular circumstances. Mathematically, it's probably just not actually the case. It's some nose ring, usual, reverse Munchausen looking person. But I can't say, I don't know the details of that case. But most of these cases, it's bullshit. It's made up. And they had this weepy interview. The CBC is running the normal propaganda line on this, even though the overwhelming majority of Albertans support this legislation, keeping biological males out of female sports, stopping minors from transitioning, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's the usual suspects lining up on it. But I don't know. Alberta had not used the notwithstanding clause ever until extremely recently, and now we're if there was 8 in the chamber, we only got 4 left.
Yeah, they didn't hesitate. And it's not just the CBC. I torment myself with some conventional talk radio in the mornings on the way here. And they were interviewing a similar Munchausen by proxy mother who was talking about her preteen child who now is just going to be devastated and ruined because apparently they weren't allowed to interfere with her development as chemically for drugs. It's absurdity. And I appreciate the Smith government saying the quiet part out loud with this. European countries have brought in similar legislation. You hear silence from the left from that in the world of progressiveness that, let's quit pretending that interfering with a natural body's progression from childhood to adulthood, which is called puberty, isn't a radical intervention, isn't potentially dangerous, will not lead to permanent consequences. Let's quit pretending that boys can compete in girls' sports and not cause risk and damage and things. I mean, as you said, the majority of people looking at that know that this is not. It's absurd that we even had to legislate to stop these things. But it also shows, as you said, that the lack of trust in the courts. We don't expect common sense from our courts anymore. Do we want to have to waste the time of having all the hearings from these lunatics, from the activists, from the weepy sorts, from the nenchies, only to have some crazy court rule against it perhaps, and then you have to invoke the notwithstanding clause then. So let's just do it right now, get it out of the way, and we're done. But boy, the reaction in Canada when Alberta uses the notwithstanding clause as compared to Quebec using the what? No, sure is night and day, isn't it?
Yeah. I'll go to William. I'm generally supportive of this. I mean, this is kind of the legislative nuclear option, but I don't want us to be over trigger happy about use of the notwithstanding clause. The charter has some good purposes. I think it's been a very weird constitutional ingredient into a Westminster Parliament, where normally Parliament is supreme and not a written constitution. That's an American import into our system, but it's there, and it has sometimes been beneficial, sometimes not. But I mean, the courts have done themselves no favors here. When they argue in the court's rule that, we're going to give this guy a lighter sentence so that we don't compromise his ability to stay in Canada and he doesn't get deported. That is pure madness that no reasonable person, I think, would support. I mean, it'd be a very small percentage of the population backing that kind of thing. But the courts are supposed to be above politics. They're supposed to be above the sentiments of the mob, because the mob can very often be wrong. So I want to be able to trust the courts here. The problem is we can't. But are we, by starting to, preemptively use the notwithstanding clause here, does that run the risk of making the charter meaningless, making judicial independence meaningless? Your thoughts?
So for me, first of all, I think it's crazy when we're talking about the charter and this kind of stuff like that. It's crazy when the Liberal government was busy literally violating the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, invoking the Emergencies Act, using the law, Canada's democratic processes illegally and unreasonably. It's not just me saying that, it's a federal court. No one on the left had anything to say. In fact, they defended those actions, right? But now when we have the law, right, and Canada's fundamental democratic processes, they're being used legally, like the way that they're intended to be used, right? Albeit in a way the left doesn't like. right? They're up in arms, and I think that speaks volumes. It's never been about human rights. It's always been about imposing your beliefs on others, and for their own good, no left. And I think less. And I think that's the modern left for you. I think that actually, like, one of the things that's kind of funny to me is that we've heard us talk about this uneasy alliance between, like, let's say, Islamic extremists and left-wing radicals on communists, right? But I don't think it's an uneasy or tense alliance at all. It's really quite an intimate relationship, and they share a ton of ideological similarities. They're more similar, I think, in fact, than not. They both espouse a rigid gender ideology and impose it on all and sundry. They both think like fundamental human rights, like free speech and freedom of belief, mean nothing, and violence to them is ultimately the answer to any disagreement with their dogma. There's no place for any ideas but their own in society. No, and I think that's what we have this.
I guess the same to you, Nigel. I support the use here. I mean, these are common sense pieces of legislation, overwhelmingly supported by most Albertans. The NDP this is one of those, it's not even a 70-30 issue. It's an 80-20. Like, overwhelmingly people are on side with this kind of stuff. The NDP is captured by the hard end of its base, and that happens to parties. Sometimes I maybe have been a part of it myself. But they've taken the 20 side of an 80 question here. I'm not sure. I guess they just can't bear to piss off their kind of radical progressivist, we'll call it sex Marxism, or I don't know what the hell you call this, but they still remain on that side. The legacy media seems almost, there'll be a couple columnists who dissent here and there. Yeah, I'm guessing, you'll see a Rick Bell speak out in support, dissenting from the rest of the media. But the legacy media here, still overwhelmingly on that side. I don't know why they're as captured, though, as, say, the NDP. The NDP has political pressures internally that are going to keep them on the 20 side of that 80 question. I don't know why is the CBC still doing this? Like, they don't have market pressures. They don't have the same kind of political pressures.
Well, I don't know that that's the case, actually, Derek, because, Canada's national semi-official news agency is funded by the government. And Heritage Canada definitely has a point of view on these things. You might recall that when we were speaking with John Hilton O'Brien last couple of months, he was explaining how some of the gay sex books that we object to in the school libraries, actually the plan originates, is funded through Heritage Canada. Well, why would they care? I honestly don't know, but they clearly do. And the same people would be talking to CBCs. Put that together with the fact that women tend to be empathetic more than men do, and will see perhaps the painful dilemma that some poor kids going through puberty, all mixed up to hell, and just say, well, and it's totally unwise, but say, well, let them change. Danielle Smith, to her credit, is a little bit more hard-nosed than that. She realizes that with parental support and good counsel, they'll get through it, and they'll come out at the end of it, the other side, with a perfectly normal disposition. You just have to stop them from doing something that's going to ruin them for life when they're 13 years old. Lord knows we don't let them drive. Why would we let them make a decision like that?
You're not allowed to get a tattoo. You shouldn't allowed to be messing with your kids' bits and pieces.
You want another analogy? I mean, the chemicals used to stunt puberty are the same used for chemical castration in places where they do that with sex offenders. And that was found to be inhumane for sex offenders. But we're talking about putting it into 13, 14-year-old kids. I mean, this is just such a bizarre...
It's all the intent, isn't it? But anyway, the point is, she knows what the voters want. The thing that the charter cost us is representational democracy. Basically, if you have a problem, you get a lawyer and go to court. You don't go to see your MP. They'll get overruled by the courts anyway. But the notwithstanding clause was there for this express purpose of taking back control. Well, she took back control. Power to her.
All right. Fight here is with courts. The next fight, I think, is Danielle Smith is picking here. If this Globe story is in fact accurate, I have not seen it denied, so I'm going to go on the basis that it is, because I hope very much that this is true. During the UCP leadership, I moderated a debate between herself and two of the other leading candidates, and I asked them all, including Smith, everyone talks about, I'm going to fix healthcare, and I'm going to tinker here, and I'm going to tinker there. And, it's been 54 years, and the system is worse than ever. I mean, you've had 54 years to make single-payer, government monopoly healthcare work, and it has failed. And I asked them, are you willing to break the Canada Health Act? And all of them either said no, or variations of dancing around the question to more or less say no without saying it explicitly. This looks like it. So the Globe is reporting that they're going to allow doctors to practice in both the public and the private system. That opens the door to a lot more private. Now, I mean, pearl clutching types in Canada are going to say, oh my God, this means two-tier healthcare. The whole planet has two-tier healthcare. Canada has two-tier healthcare. It's called America. The extremely wealthy, I know a couple of them, they just go to the United States, get an MRI, they get cancer screening, they get this stuff done, and they pay out of pocket. They can do that by allowing it in Canada, allowing private insurance. That's going to be what we now need, is private insurance for primary care, not just secondary care and bells and whistles, if I can call it that. But this is a big step that would be a direct violation of the Canada Health Act. Now, for those following at home, Alberta is not bound by the Canada Health Act because that is federal legislation. That just says that the federal government could then stop healthcare transfers to a province that breaks the Canada Health Act. A normal person looking at the Constitution would say that's unconstitutional, but our courts, being our courts, ruled it's fine because it's just giving money around. It's not telling them what to do. But yeah, Nigel, I think this is a ballsy one. This has been the third rail in Canadian politics for my entire life, preceding even that a bit, to the point where even Stockwell Day had to hold up a sign during a national leaders debate when he was a leader of the Alliance saying, no, two-tier healthcare. Is the taboo broken?
I hope so. I share your sentiments entirely when you were pounding the desk there a moment. This is a very old Danielle Smith idea from way back when she was in the Calgary Herald editorial board. She was saying, one of the many things that we can do to get the system moving is let doctors pick up work on the side. I think she probably phrased it a little more elegantly than that, but that was the essence of it. What's the point of having medical facilities ready to go, but you're not allowed to use them because there isn't a budget for them? Here you are, you're waiting for a medical procedure. There is the operating theater. There is the empty slab. There is the doctor who's reading a book. Why? Because the government doesn't have the funds to put him to work. All right. Hey, what? I got funds. Fix me. Why would you not do that? Why would the government, and this is true of governments right across Canada, they'll let you spend your money on all kinds of things that are bad for you, but you try and spend your money on something that's good for you, like getting
it's illegal.
Can't have that,
Uh-huh.
what's the matter with these people? This is absolute common sense. I hope, like you, I haven't seen any documentation. I haven't seen the draft. I haven't seen the leaked document. I've only got the Globe and Mail to go on, and usually the Globe has got something before they go to press, so I'm inclined to think that this is a real story.
I haven't denied it, so.
Well, they haven't denied it, so let's hope it's going to happen. Now, the question is, when Rolf Klein, years and years ago, you'll remember this, he had a plan to try and take care of the problem in waiting rooms where people were frankly abusing the system, showing up on a Sunday night with a sniffle. They could have come in on Friday. They could have, like people who didn't need to be in emergency were showing up in emergency.
Uh-huh.
Said, all right, we'll charge you $10 just for coming in for a visit. Just a little bit of money out of pocket. People will adjust their behavior. Well, that was terrible. We couldn't do that. That's a violation of the Canada Health Act. We're going to withhold the CHST, as it was called in those days, Canada Health and Social Transfer payments. And, well, I don't know whether anybody would have done any different, but Mr. Klein So, all right, and that was that. And then he doubled down and introduced Bill 11 to actually outlaw private hospitals in Alberta, and that law is still in effect. So I like the idea of this. I'd like to see Bill 11 abolished, and maybe we put some hospitals in Alberta and go looking for business outside Alberta, bring the cost of, procedures down through competition, and really start to make a difference, because what's happening now is ridiculous.
Well, William, if we do this in Alberta, we're going to have some competition because we're not the first, actually. Quebec allows this. There was the Chiuli decision. God, that must have been, 20 years ago?
2002, I think it was. Maybe 3.
Okay, yeah, over 20 years ago, we had the Chiuli decision. Found it was, I forget the exact wording, but there was found that access to a waiting list does not constitute access to health care, and banning people from then going and paying for their own health care was therefore a violation of security of the person, your right to liberty and life, and as I right to life and all that. Quebec has had this for a long time, but no one likes to talk about it. It seems to fly below the radar. So the fact that Quebec's been doing this for 20 years, I don't know. Do you think this gives Alberta some cover from reprisal from Ottawa? That, if Alberta goes for this, they can't turn around and penalize Alberta if it's already been allowed in Quebec for over 20 years.
It should, but, Quebec is treated very uniquely. I think the other thing is that Alberta is being rendered kind of synonymous with the conservative and the right in Canada, and so they can't do anything right. They're ultimately the cause of every problem. But you're right, it shouldn't be controversial at all. In fact, the strongest, the best healthcare systems in the world in Japan and Europe use similar system. So I'm in America a fair bit, and I'm plugged into a lot of the conversations there, and you hear it everywhere in the States. Amongst the socialists there, Canada's public healthcare system is so great. Everybody gets to see the doctor, not just the rich, and it's simply not true. Nobody gets to see the doctors here. I think that's the problem. Rich, poor, no one. There are years-long waiting lists for even urgent operations, and people routinely die on the wait list without getting to see their doctors. It's so bad that they're offering that we're offering to kill people ourselves now with MAID, right? Because and our most vulnerable populations at that. I thought that we were trying to be the most European of nations. Why the opposition? It's just weird to me. Maybe the weirdest thing is that it's Alberta that's suddenly so progressive. But you hit it on the head. All the opposition is because it's a conservative idea. And again, from Danielle Smith, who is again that avatar of all that's bad in Canada, all conservatism, populism, and that's why it's been so rejected.
Cory, as I was saying with Nigel, this has been the third rail in Canadian politics forever. Ralph Klein had his third way he proposed, and that obviously hit a brick wall politically. This hasn't been announced. It's just come out through the Globe. Because it's Carrie Tate in the Globe, I'm guessing this is not a strategic leak. This was not intentional. Someone in the government, I don't know, it could be a political staffer, could be a member of the legislature, could be a bureaucrat. Someone who doesn't like it probably gave it. I think this was intended to be a negative story, but I'm like, oh, well, this is some of the best news we've gotten. More of this. But I mean, it's not going to be without political controversy. I think there's, especially among, I think, younger people, the cult status of universal health care. Young people today have never remembered a time where it worked because it never has worked. So young people, it's never worked in my time. I don't know if it's ever even worked in your guys' time. It's always been crap. I mean, when I crashed a motorcycle and I was in really serious critical condition, I've been pretty good. As soon as I was kind of patched back together and I needed to start learning to walk again, turned to crap, and I just went to private. I exited the public system at that time. But for the most part, I've had non-life-threatening issues. It's crap. I've sat in an emergency room bleeding out, trying to hold blood inside from passing out in the waiting room. But I don't know. Do you think we're at the time where this is now entered the politically possible, or is this still just too much of a sacred cow?
I don't know. I hope that, the thing that has to be done is we got to chip away at the orthodoxy. And maybe the next generation hasn't been as trained, at least, as we were when we were younger. It was always Canada has the best system in the world. Canada has the best system in the world. And it's not. It's not by any measure any longer, not even close. It's low and it's plummeting. we've got to become, to use the leftist term, non-binary. Let's bring this discussion.
I believe in non-binary.
Yeah, let's bring it out of there's just the American and Canadian systems, because that's the narrative they've put together. And in reality, there's dozens and dozens of universal systems all over the world, many, if not most of which, are outperforming us. But we've got to start looking at them. I mean, we've got to bring that discussion to that. Why can't we look at the Netherlands? Why can't we look at France? Why can't we look at Singapore?
Why can't we look at any other system on the planet other than North Korea and Cuba, which are the only other two that ban private healthcare?
Exactly. But we need to change that narrative for this to get through, so it won't be as controversial. We need to have that rational discussion without the screaming of the unions and the rest, to say, look, let's emulate what's working best and bring it here. That's
rational discussion. You've been around long enough.
I'm asking
You've
for
been
a lot
around long enough. That's not going to happen.
And the punitive aspect from the feds, we should turn that around and at least point at, yes, the Canada Health Act says this, but it also initially said the feds were going to cover 50% of our healthcare.
Sure.
And they only cover about 20. Which is not insignificant. If they cut that out of a transfer, it's going to hurt the province dearly in health provision if this came to that kind of battle. But the feds aren't holding up their side of it either. If they think it's affordable for us to maintain this system, then they should be able to afford to fund 50% of it. And they aren't even close. So we've got to take that back to them. Unfortunately, it starts through a leak. It starts at the same time that it looks like the provincial government might have messed up the laboratory contracts and things such as that, which reduces trust when it comes to these things. But as I said, we welcome the discussion, but that's us. Will the public? That's the bigger question.
Well, anyone from the Premier or Health Minister's office watching, you should have just leaked it to us. The Globe got it anyway. You should have just given it to us. Although I don't think the Globe article it wasn't terribly unfair.
No, she's good. I mean,
Yeah, it was actually
it was
a fairly fair piece.
a veteran journalist.
Yeah, it wasn't some torqued up hit piece. The world, the sky's gonna fall. I think it was actually a fair piece. I know some of you are gonna hate on me for saying that. Credit where it's due. I think it was fair. All right.
Well, I think too, like you guys have all hit on a very important point. I think it's like Canada's changed, right? Maybe a long time ago in Canada, far, far away, like one that wasn't crippled by a crumbling economy, rampant crime, and unbridled, unregulated international migration. Maybe there and then a completely public healthcare system worked, but it hasn't worked in this Canada, our Canada, for quite some time. Never mind what happened during COVID. I think that's the other kind of lurking ghoul in all this, right? COVID, the pandemic has eroded the public's trust in the state healthcare apparatus collectively. I mean, I don't think there's really any going back from that.
Yeah. Also, you got to remember, we've imported a ridiculous number of people into this country lately, and they have not been propagandized that Canada has the great. Oh, actually, it's funny. The federal government actually is advertising that Canada has free health care to migrants. They're like, come here, work for not a lot of money, so you're also not paying a lot of taxes, and enjoy free health care. We're advertising free health care, free. But they're not. They haven't spent their life being propagandized with this. Canada's got the crappiest, wimpiest myths. If countries are, some have described countries as a group of people with shared myths and stories. Well, we've gotten rid of all the real ones, and we were just down to, and where we have this great universal health, the greatest healthcare system in the world, and it's we're peace and order. We don't have peace and order in our streets. Our healthcare system is dog shit. All of these myths that come out of the Trudeaupian era of Trudeau the First, I don't think they have a lot of currency anymore. Present company excluded. I think it only holds with segments of the boomers, and that's about it at this time. I don't think people my age and younger I think around, that's what makes me Canadian. Free, great health care and public order in the streets. Because, that's what we're getting in this country right now.
Well, I don't think anybody would be able to really define what it means to be Canadian right now outside of without using not American in some way. I think you went to the average Canadian on the street, all the pillars would have meant to be Canadian have eroded and collapsed spectacularly, right? I think that one of the best points is all of our doctors are actually leaving to go to these other healthcare systems. They've lost faith in Canada's systems, in our political apparatus as a whole. I think it's half of Canadian youth. They were in favor of becoming America's 51st state at the close of the last election. And I think that's telling. That's our entire future. Half of our future. We've no future in Canada.
Okay, well, I'm going to come to you first on the next one, William. The secret liberal conservative coalition. I say that a little tongue-in-cheek. The Conservatives were always talking about the Liberal NDP coalition. That was it was, strictly speaking, a coalition government in the old sense, but it was a formal working agreement that I think you could say fairly constitute a coalition of a kind. The Conservatives do not want to be seen as the successors to the NDP in that coalition. We saw how well that worked for the NDP in the last election when they were utterly obliterated, didn't even get official party status, and had the worst result, not just in the history of the NDP, and not just in the history of even the CCF, but even the precursors to the CCF, but they're, kind of the odd little radical Labour Party around. They got annihilated. The Conservatives' voter base do not want to be seen to be propping up the Liberals, but they don't want an election right now. The polls are not great. They went into the last election doing pretty well, and then obviously kind of blew it. Their voter they got a lot of votes. Their vote went up, but obviously the Liberal vote went up even more with the dissolution of the NDP. The Conservatives wanted to desperately avoid an election. The Liberals got Elizabeth May's vote, but the Conservatives had, I think, 2 abstentions. One was Shannon Phillips, who they said was having a medical procedure or something. I don't know. I haven't talked to her. But often when that's the case, the whips will coordinate and say, fine, we have someone who has a very serious medical issue. Then you pair off someone on your side. I mean, that's the way these things have gone on for over 100 years. The Liberals did not have a similar abstention on their side. And I'm not aware of the Conservatives making any effort to get one. But I've not talked to Shannon Phillips. No idea about the actual circumstance, but that's what's been said. The other one was Matt Genereux. There's a riddle wrapped inside an enigma of a news story about what actually happened. Word was he was going to cross the floor to the Liberals, and then he says, no, I'm not. I'm retiring, but I'm not retiring right away. Doesn't really say what for. The whole thing smells. I haven't made heads or tails of it, but the thing smells. And he didn't vote, but he hasn't resigned from Parliament yet. He has not resigned. He is still sitting as a Conservative MP, and he didn't show up on the budget. And then, adding to this, the Conservative, I think, Andrew Scheer's House Leader, right?
No, it's, what's her name? Lanceman.
Well, she's a deputy leader.
Oh,
House Leader, yeah. She's deputy.
Okay,
I think Andrew Scheer is the House Leader. That's the guy responsible, along with the whip, for making sure everything going on in the House goes according to plan and everyone's there on time, etc. He was found on the camera watching Parliament. You could see him kind of hiding behind those curtains that are behind the backbenches in there, and then I guess when it looked like, okay, we don't have enough votes to actually defeat the budget and therefore trigger an election, then he came out to vote, got on the record as voting against. Okay, guys. I know the Conservatives don't like the budget. It's not a conservative budget. It doesn't cut taxes, doesn't really cut spending. It's not a great budget. But they don't want an election. William, I don't know. Am I just too much of a bloody conspiracy theorist here, or did the Conservatives intentionally not defeat the budget?
No, it reeks to high heaven. I think you're bang on. I think that this is exactly why Trump and draining the swamp, what people call populism nowadays, which is really just democracy relabeled, why it all became so popular a decade ago. Corruption abounds. There appear to be no real alternatives. And let's be clear here, it wasn't just the Conservatives. Every party participated in the subversion of Canada's democracy. The NDP, the Green Party, everybody was party to the plot. And you could even say that this kind of corrupt, undemocratic garbage, because that is what it is, let's call a spade, it's what underlies the current incredible popularity of the secessionist movement in Alberta. I mean, even in Quebec, if I understand correctly, rumblings are starting. And the big problem, the major problem, is that Pierre Poilievre is either party to it all or powerless against it. Or at least that's how it looks to everyone in Canada. And I think that the budget passing and not having an election is ultimately going to be framed or justified as something not good for Canada. But what are we really talking about here? Is a Liberal government good for Canada? No, not at all. And so to me, I think the really only recourse is to have the election. I mean, I know that we don't want it. It isn't the right moment. But then we turn around and we start complaining about how bad things are in Canada. The only way to fix it, only way to get through it is through an election.
Sorry, just we just had a test of the Alberta emergency alert system come through. So
I'll leave that in the show. Let people know it works.
And that was loud. I thought it was my mic again.
no, then they're gonna see we pre-report it because everyone's
Oh,
gonna
okay.
gotten it earlier in the day, or at least for our
No.
Alberta watchers.
I got too passionate or something,
Cory,
But
Cory did. They voted against it, so it's not like the NDP who stood up voting that Jagmeet Singh would stand up and be like, this government has failed Canadians. It sucks. It deserves to go. And then he stands up and votes. Yes, I'm keeping them in power. Yes, I'm voting for the budget. It wasn't that. They voted against the budget. They spoke against the budget, but they allowed the budget to pass. I think that's pretty transparent here. But for the average, you think the average person, is this going to get through the average Canadian voter that the Conservatives let it?
No, I think your average Canadian doesn't really watch how parliamentary sausage gets made. I mean, this is done in minority governments. It's been done a lot, many, many times. As I said, I think the term used to be the parliamentary flu. They come along and, as you said, the whip or the House leader is going to be watching.
Normally, the House leader is more than halfway behind the curtain.
Well, yeah, they get usually a little more discretion, but then suddenly a couple of members get the Hershey squirts and vanish until they can't pass that vote possibly under any other circumstance, and then they get a full recovery and come back. But this can't go on too long, or they will suffer the fate of Jagmeet Singh. You can kick that can down the road because you aren't in a position to hit an election, and play both sides. Say that you oppose the budget, yet make sure it kind of passes. But they will have to try and find themselves, or they will get weakened every time this happens. So, I mean, you can't rail and say we're going to bring the government down, and then carefully make sure that you don't actually do it too many times before you've cried wolf too many times. You just look too weak. And people will say the same thing they did with the NDP. Well, if the NDP is just going to be liberal, I might as well just vote for the Liberals. And it'll happen that way with the Conservatives. I think what the Conservatives would have to worry about is weakening themselves so much that the Liberals feel they can manufacture a loss of confidence and go to the polls and really nail them when they really don't want to go.
That's what I wanted to ask you, Nigel, was there was some speculation the Liberals would have been just happy for the budget to be voted down, get an election. They're higher in the polls. They're only 2 seats away from a majority right now because there was one Conservative across the floor. Liberals, they have a de facto majority, as we've been saying, but it's a tight one. And, you have one grumpy member of caucus. He's got leverage over you all of a sudden. When you have if you have an actual majority with some space, you could tell them, okay, go ahead and vote against the budget. We're kicking you out of your riding. Your political career's done. They don't really have that kind of leverage right now. How much do you think the Liberals would have been just fine for this to be defeated, go to election?
Oh, I think, they would have come through on it all right. The polls seem to indicate that they would have had a good start. But everybody gets very focused on this majority. Well, you got one, or you maybe got a majority of 2 or whatever. Stephen Harper governed from 2006 to 2011 from a minority position. That is not to say that it is fun. It is hard work.
Everyone wants a majority.
Everybody wants a majority, obviously, but you're constantly wheeling and dealing and making arrangements here. And in some ways, that's kind of good for democracy. If you actually have to work things out with the other side, the result is not always bad. So Cory, with or without a majority, well, obviously the government would have fallen on his budget, but if he's in a minority position, should somebody change their mind, he can still get things done. It's been done before many times. So what I do to deeply deplore is why Conservatives are allowing any kind of discussion over the leadership of Pierre Poilievre. There's one thing to do it behind closed doors, but there's constant sort of jockeying and showing polls and people going on the television as well. I like him, but I don't like him, and he shouldn't be leader anymore. He's had his chance. You're going to work with the guy. This is why they're down in the polls, is they're not presenting a united front.
I don't know. It's natural. They lost the election. They blew a gigantic lead. I'd say the dissension is pretty mild compared to what leaders have faced after previous defeats. Harper faced more backlash after he lost his first election, 2004. but he had made huge gains. It was the first election of the United Federal Conservative Party. They had brought the Liberals from a big majority down to a minority. Think of British Columbia right now. We're not talking about John Restak, but we just more news broken from our man Jared Yager, our reporter in BC. More dissension coming there. They're just ripping themselves apart, and that is affecting the polls.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's unhealthy for a party. I think Poilievre is probably the best guy to lead them right now. I think Conservative members would be well advised to vote to renew his leadership. But I think it's healthy for a party to air this in a civil way after a defeat.
Well, let's hope you're right. With the leadership review coming up in January, there's too many people who look like they're trying to position themselves for something.
Well, such is the nature of politics. Yeah. But yeah. Okay, well, we'll put a pin in that. Go to our parting shots. First parting shot to Cory.
Sure, I'll start with just something that surprised me on X. It's something I railed about before, but I reminded people that Jody Gondek and her Council of Clowns there had renamed Fort Calgary into the Confluence a year and some ago. People were upset with that, which is fine, but what surprised me was how many people said I didn't realize she'd done that. They really slid that one under the radar. Mm-hmm. So I've written, some self-serving things. I've written a column in the Standard that came out today on that. You know what? This would be a good start for this council to reverse that ridiculous thing, even if it's costly. We can't let this erasure of history keep happening. Rename Fort Calgary to Fort Calgary. The new mayor and council have a chance to do that and set an example for these self-serving ones who have their vanity woke projects. You're going to have it reversed if you push it through. So just stick to council business and quit renaming crap.
I actually asked Jeremy Farkas about that in an interview very soon before the election. And he didn't say no, but he definitely didn't say yes either, saying, that some of the chiefs in the area would consider it a declaration of war. I don't know. But I mean, Mayor Farkas, new council, show some balls. Fort Calgary is pretty important to the history of Calgary, and that's what it's always been until a couple of jackasses came around and decided to sanitize the name. I don't think it's a particular... There's no statue of General Lee there. Like, for God's sakes. It's Fort Calgary.
It's the namesake of the city. If you're ready to change that, the next step will be changing the actual name of the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you won't be able to pronounce it. No. See the spelling on it?
It'll be a Vancouver Street.
Yeah. Okay. William, parting shot.
Cool. So as y'all know, I was recently invited to speak and present my essay, Canada's right-wing response to a decade of liberal oppression at the Toronto Democracy Forum. Confronts what everyone in Canada, the right wing of the political spectrum, conservatives in Canada have been going through over the past decade. We should have the butt, as I understand, on the Western Standard website sometime soon. Or y'all can head over to my Twitter X to check it out. My handle is Will Barclay, PCBG. Please do give it a read. It's being well received, so I hope you guys enjoy it.
Nigel.
Yeah. Yeah, so I keep tabs on the BC news, and as BC human rights chief, one of these empathetic ladies that I was talking about earlier, declares that it's colonialist to stigmatize drug use. Drug use is, I guess, a legitimate. Anyway, look, it's just crazy. In BC, it's not the drugs that are dangerous; only the people who notice that they're dangerous are wicked colonialists.
What a weird world. The British Empire fought several opium wars to make the Chinese do drugs. Yeah. The Empire fought wars to make sure people are doing their drugs and staying docile. Somehow it's now colonialist or imperialist to say perhaps you should not be addicted to drugs and have a productive life.
Yeah, that stooped over fentanyl addict is just living his best life, and we're not to criticize that.
That is racist, Cory. All right. You've already heard it. I just got to get it off my chest. The Epstein files. It's coming. It's you know what? We're gonna get disappointed somehow. Somehow, no matter what laws get passed, I feel like we're just never actually gonna get it. I hope I'm wrong. The Democrats did not give a crap about Jeffrey. Actually, no, they probably did give a crap. They didn't speak a word, I should say, of Jeffrey Epstein for 4 years while Biden's in. They were silent. They were silent about it when Trump was in the first time. They did not want it out. They were silent during 4 years when they had Biden in the White House, including when they had majority control of Congress. Then all of a sudden they got religion and they wanted out because they saw it was a big divide within the Republicans. The harder, the more mega side of the Republican Party wanted this out. Trump had been campaigning hard. I'm going to release it. This is a part of draining the swamp. We're going to release the Epstein files. Everyone's going to get to see everything. And he wins. And then we got this dog and pony show of fake release of files that were already released and don't show very much. And then there are no files. And then maybe there's files, but if you want the files, you're a traitor to me and traitor to Mega, and I don't want your support. And then you had a couple of brave Republican members of the House break away to side with the Democrats because it's a pretty thin majority. They used their leverage. They made a power play. And then it started an avalanche. And Trump was saying, this is just one where he's just dead wrong. And for what reason he's doing this, I don't know. He's dead wrong. And he was saying, to his closest allies like Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene, like the people who would take a bullet for Trump, say they're traitors. You call her Marjorie Traitor Greene. Not a bad nickname, but very imprecise, I think, in this case. And we started an avalanche where you then had more than 100 Republican defectors, where they were able to force it to a vote on the floor. Trump threw up his hands and says, actually, it's good. Yeah, let's actually vote for the bill to release the Epstein files. And then it was unanimous, except for one guy, one lone Republican down in Louisiana who voted against it. I want to see what's on that guy's hard drive. And then it's expected to get unanimous support now in the Senate. Theoretically, the Department of Justice is going to be required by law to release everything other than like explicit images that should obviously be protected for people's privacy, because I don't know. I don't know how, but I feel like an asteroid is going to come or something and hit Congress. Something's going to happen to stop us from getting these files. I'm not going to believe it until they're in my hands. But boy, I'm giddy.
Okay, sweaty palms.
Yeah,
you bet.
Okay, well that's it, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Nigel, Cory, William,
Well, it was a pleasure.
Jonathan running the studio here. And thank all of you for joining us today on The Pipeline. Remember, the Western Standard relies on people like you to support our work. If you're not yet a member, go to westernstandard.news right now. Click on subscribe. It's $10 a month or $100 a year for unlimited access to all Western Standard content. You won't hit that pesky paywall when you'll get the newsletter from us in the morning. You'll see us on your social feeds. You click it, you hit the paywall. Damn it. Well, you got to pay. It costs money to run this newsroom behind us here with our people sprinkled across Canada like we got William in Ottawa now. Thank you very much for joining us today, and God bless.